very layered skill of reading can be broken apart. And so just like a rope, each compartment or each little piece of mini skill, you could say, has to be woven together to make a skilled, strong reader. And we can break those pieces into two major parts, and that's language comprehension and word recognition. So the language comprehension begins at the earliest stages when you begin speaking to your baby, and then providing background knowledge through experiences. This builds oral vocabulary, and hearing others speak provides a strong foundation in language structure and verbal reasoning. So many of these skills mentioned are not something that can be filled in very easily in school. In fact, this is where we see the largest achievement gap between students from different socioeconomic backgrounds. But the bottom strand, word recognition, this is where we at Kensington have identified a major focus this year. Brain research has shown us that being able to hear or manipulate individual sounds in words is an extremely important foundational skill. So our kindergarten and first grade teachers have explicitly taught this skill this year, and we've seen great growth in our diagnostic testing due to this intentional instruction. We have also reassessed our phonics instruction and are refocusing with new curriculum that teaches readers how to crack the code of the English language. So this visual shows that as students become more masterful at each strand, they can begin to focus on being automatic and strategic. This is the work of 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, where students are exposed to more complex texts and think more deeply about what they're reading. And then the very bottom piece that says a simple view of reading. This is about the simplest way that this very layered piece can be broken down to show that both strands, language comprehension and word recognition, also known as decoding, they work like a multiplication equation. 1 times 1 equals 1. So we must have decoding mastered, multiplied by language skills mastered to be able to have skilled reading comprehension. If one of those pieces is missing, 1 times 0 is 0. So if we have a strong decoder, but a child who doesn't have very strong background knowledge or vocabulary, they're going to struggle with reading comprehension. And in the same light, if we have a child who has great background knowledge, great vocabulary, great speaking, but can't figure out the words on the page, they're also going to struggle with reading comprehension. So now I'm going to turn it over to Miss Kristen Flores, who's going to talk, and Felicia Moore, who are going to talk through what this looks like in the classroom.
Thanks. Okay, so as Emily had stated earlier, like Union County Public Schools, we've used the structure called literacy as I've been here, and I've been at Kensington for 16 years. So this shift has been a long time coming, but is very needed. One of the major differences between balanced literacy versus structured literacy is that balanced literacy focuses more on the meaning of a text rather than focusing on how to like crack the code basically of the English language. So with structured literacy, we kind of flip it and we're focusing more on how we learn, like how kids learn how to read. So the ultimate goal is going to be, of course, meaning of the text, being able to understand what a child is reading. But in order to do that, you have to be able to read the words on the page. Otherwise, the meaning is going to be irrelevant. So with structured literacy, it starts with phonology. And phonology is being able to hear and kind of manipulate the sounds within a given word. So there's lots of different like areas under phonology. So one of the areas we start with, especially in kindergarten, would be at the sentence level. So if I said a sentence like, Kristen likes to play soccer, The kids would have to be able to count and be able to tell me how many words are within that sentence. But it gets tricky when you get into multisyllabic words, like Kristen has 2 syllables, soccer is 2. But for them to be able to understand that soccer in and of itself is 1 word. Then it moves into the word level, which would be looking at rhyming words. So I can either give the students 2 words, they can give me a thumbs up, does it rhyme, does it not rhyme? Or it can go into being able to produce the word. So if I said cat, can the kid like spit out another word that rhymes with cat? And then you can work into the syllable level and being able to count how many syllables are in a given word. So like if I said soccer, I usually put my hand up and I have the kids count with their fingers as they tap the sounds on the palm of their hand. So like soccer, and they'd be able to tell me that's 2 syllables. Another way to do that is by placing your hand under your chin. So if I said soccer, you're counting how many times your jaw drops, like how many times is your mouth open, which tells how many syllables are in the word. It also can be, like if you look at the example with the picture of like what's the common sound, like I can show a series of pictures to the students and can they tell me if I ask, okay, which pictures start the same? Or which one doesn't belong? Are they able to look at the beginning sound versus the ending sound, or even like the middle sounds, and being able to say, oh, these have this in common, but these words are different. Another one is being able, we call them the Conan boxes. I don't know if you guys can really see this or not, but here's just kind of like an example, and this can be shown in various ways. But the idea is if I was to say dog, the kids would first need to be able to tap the number of sounds within that word. So dog, dog. There's 3 sounds. So then with the Conan box, they could go dog, dog. And once they are able to do that, then they take their little chips and be able to slide it up. So dog, and know that that's 3 sounds. Another way this can be shown is by, there's different versions the kids have seen it, but it's the same concept, but you can have up to as many boxes as you need based on the word. But the idea is that once a child kind of segments the sounds, are they able to blend it back together? We can, within phonology, also look at being able to isolate the initial or the final sound in a given word, being able to blend sounds. So if I said fast, can the student say that that's fast? Or vice versa. If I say fast, can they segment and go fast and be able to hear the sounds? It can also go into manipulating the sounds. So if I said fast, say fast without the, can they go the ending part? If I said dog, say dog without the g, can they say dog? Things like that. If you go into the sound symbol, that's being able to take the sounds and now connect it with the actual letter. So when we were doing this with dog, once they're able to hear the sound, then can they go back and can they match the letter that correlates with the sound? So d would be the D, would be the O, and then g would be the G. And then with the syllable instruction, you're looking at being able to teach the students the different ways to break words apart and to understand the patterns and the meaning so that they can now relate what they're hearing, but also into their spelling and what they're reading. Okay, Felicia, go for it.
All right. So I just want to first start off by saying it's important to understand that all of these components are taught across K-5. So even though some of those examples might have seemed like they are for the younger grade levels, they do differentiate as the kids get older. And so all of these different elements of structured literacy are covered across K-5 instruction. Now, obviously, some of the ones that I'm going to talk about, like morphology, syntax, and semantics, are going to be a little bit more advanced, but there are ways that we incorporate it in the lower grades as well. And so morphology, when we look at that, that's looking at and understanding meaningful parts of words and understanding how we can compose and decompose words by finding those different word parts. So just an example, and again, I put this together for, parents in mind. This would be a little bit more difficult for some of our kids to do, but if you would like to participate, you're welcome to in the chat, looking at the word graph and then using the different prefixes like bio, geo, tele, photo, auto, and the suffixes y, ic, and all. How many words can you create using those word parts? And so if you want to participate, you're welcome to by throwing some different words in the chat. But this is an example of how we would teach morphology in the schools and based on the different grade levels. And I mean, even just thinking about the word photograph and then having to change it to photography, just understanding that those sounds in general, like it's not photo anymore, it's phota. So, and having to flip back and forth between the different pronunciations as you make words with one common thread is something we would teach and show the students as well. Probably flip back, Emily. Thanks, Mr. Vaughn, for participating.
Sorry, wrong way.
And then syntax has to do a lot with grammar and sentence structure. So understanding, parts of speech, subject predicates, what makes a complete sentence, those things are all part of syntax. And semantics is understanding the meaning of words and being able to find words with similar meanings. And you can see on the slides there's example, if you have the word clean, what are words that mean the same or similar to clean, and kind of understanding just exactly what those words mean and how they're connected.
So with this slide, it kind of just shows you what's the difference between what we did in the past versus what we're doing now. So before, we relied heavily on leveled readers, which is what we would use for guided reading. And one of the things with leveled readers is, yes, they did have high frequency words in there that the kids were able to practice and to recognize. But the problem was that most of the words were bigger words that contained patterns or spelling features that we have not taught the child. And so they had to rely heavily on the picture versus actually being able to decode the word. So the shift to decodable text, it includes words that the kids will be able to segment and blend on their own. So like if you looked at the first one where it says this house is a home for a dog, like most of those are sight words with the exception of house. And house doesn't fit any of the spelling patterns. It has the sneaky like silent E, but that doesn't make the vowel say its name. It has the OU. But like being able for the kids to understand that at a very early age is hard. Whereas if you look at the other one, where it's got the pig, every single one of those words are decodable to a child at the early age. And each decodable text builds upon the skills that are introduced. So a child doesn't put eyes on a text without having seen the pattern first. At least that's how we do it within our classroom. So the text that we focus on, we really hone in on the sound and the pattern and the features that we're working on, and then give the students the opportunity to practice those skills on their own using that decodable text.
Nope.
So how can you as parents help at home? So with this slide, it kind of shows the questions and the prompts that we would use in the past versus how we've changed it and the language that we're using now within the classroom. So before, we would say, like, if a child was looking at a book and trying to figure out a word, we might say, oh, well, let's look at the picture. What in the picture starts with the sound you see in this word? And we would ask those questions like, does it look right? Does it sound right? Does it make sense? Which directed the child's attention more to the picture than it did to the actual word and the sounds. And so now we've kind of shifted that and we're asking, okay, well, what sounds do you see within this word? Let's start at the beginning and let's work our way all the way through the word. Let's sound it out. What rule goes with this spelling? What chunks of the word do you already know? Like, for example, in the word winter, like we worked on that word the other day in my classroom. When we looked at winter, we recognized that there is a sight word in. So we're able to figure that out. When we added the W, we figured out, okay, well, that's what in, that's when, and then we recognize the and I call them the sisters. So the kids know that when they see the ER together, that makes the sound, and they were able to take what they knew to blend and figure out and decode that word.
And similar to what we were already saying is we're shifting away from, look at the picture, what clues in the picture can you see to help you with that word? The shift is now, how does this show what's happening in the story? When you want the kids to focus on the illustrations and look at the pictures, we don't want to use the pictures to help us read so much. We want to use the pictures to connect the words with what's happening in the story. And I think one of the biggest shifts for a lot of parents at this point is the idea of reading levels. So, understanding that we are no longer going to tell you, hey, your kid's at level J. That's not something that we have and are using in the classroom anymore. And I'm sure many of you have already seen the MClass reports, that same test that we give 3 times a year and have given for years. We don't have that TRC, that text reading comprehension component anymore on that available. So we want to change our mindset of what's my child's reading level to more what skills is my child working on right now? Where are they performing with those skills? And so when you see those things like the MClass especially, a lot of those skills are a progression as well. So if you see, the decoding is usually one of the first things that you'll see on that report. And what research has shown and what we've seen is, if that is an area of need for your child, then you're going to see that other things are struggling as well, because that decoding piece and that letter recognition correspondence, that's really important and is the foundation for kind of all the other reading skills as well. So just kind of keep that in mind when you see MClass reports or you're trying to reach out to us as your child's teacher to find out where they are in reading, that it's not so much reading level based anymore, and that we're going to be telling you more about the skills. So some of the main ones we focus on will be the decoding, the word automaticity, and fluency and accuracy. So those are kind of the skills that you'll see on those reports and that we'll talk to you about.
So now we'd like to bring it back to how can you support your reader at home? And so back to that model of Scarborough's rope, that first piece of language comprehension is a huge piece that parents and families can support at home. That vocabulary, the language structure, and background knowledge, those are things that we can absolutely try to provide in school, but those are things that their home life is going to bring so much to that, to the richness of those conversations and to their understanding as they're reading. So those types of things are things that absolutely support your child as a reader and as a learner. Having intentional conversations, of course, it seems so simple, but it's so impactful. Ask them questions, make connections. You can absolutely do these things while they're reading, while they're watching TV shows, while they're playing with their friends, while they're listening to an audiobook. Having that type of a conversation is exactly what we need our readers to be doing. Having a wide variety of experiences. If you have the opportunity to travel or to even just go down the street and do something that you've never done before, those new experiences add to their background knowledge. And of course, encouraging reading that your child enjoys, and then support as when they need it with those types of prompts like Ms. Flores and Ms. Moore shared. We have also included a YouTube link down here below. And this link actually is going to give you the correct pronunciations of phonemes. Phonemes are the smallest sound in a word. And so as you're helping your struggling reader trying to listen for the sounds, sometimes there are some incorrect ways that we, especially in the South, like to pronounce our words. And so this is an excellent video to help you to see, am I saying the sound the way that will help my reader read? Because sometimes we make those mistakes and unintentionally affects that. Another excellent source that our North Carolina Department of Public Instruction has provided is this Literacy at Home website. And if you have your phone with you, if you want to scan that QR code, it also should, I'm going to show you really quickly this link, but it connects to here. So what is great about this website is it's broken down by grade level. And so if you have a third grader and you get your MClass report from your teacher, or your child's teacher says, you know what, I noticed that so-and-so is struggling in phonics instruction. And you go, or they say phonological awareness, and you're like, I've never heard of that thing before. What does that mean? You can choose the area. It will give you an excellent short description and a video of what this can look like at home as well as at school. And then it can give you some really neat activities that are actually doable, like things you can do in the car, things you can do while you're making dinner. It's not just here's something, a packet to print off. So there's some really great resources here for families that we want to make sure that you have in your hands to support your readers. So now that we've shared all of this information with you, we are willing and open to take a few questions if you have any. No one said he was good at it, though. We're also available if questions come about as you're kind of processing this information. You can always shoot your question to Mr. Vaughn, and then he can send it out to one of us to help. Okay, we've got a question. Will knowing text level help us select just right books? Sure.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm on my phone. I'm struggling, bouncing back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So an excellent way to, so there's still a really good rule of thumb is the 5-finger rule, that basically if they open up a page and they start reading the book, the words, and they've got 5 or more words that they are not able to read independently, the text is probably too difficult for them to read on their own. So that means that they're going to need that assistance, and they're going to need more of those prompts that we shared as well. In the past, when you were given a certain level book, most bookstores and that kind of thing wouldn't say, here are the J's, here are the here are the S's, but you can generally get a sense for whether the book is just right for your student if they're able to read 95% of the text on their own. And that's, if they on a page, if they can't read 5 words or more, then they need to try something a little bit more doable. The other piece here is that wide reading is still very, very useful. And so it's okay if they read widely. It's also okay if they get stuck on a series for a little while. So I hope that answered that question a little more clearly.
Thank you.
Yes. I see a question about the studies that have been done using this method. this research is about 60 years worth of research. So it isn't just one random thing that we're tagging onto. And that's what I think I really can get behind as an educator, is that this has been researched with brain imaging. And so that's why it's kind of gotten the title of the science of reading. If you're familiar with Orton-Gillingham method, it is based off of the majority of this research, and it's very widely known. And so typically that method has been used for our highest need readers who are struggling. But like we shared in the beginning of the slideshow, that this structured literacy can benefit all readers, not just our struggling readers. Do any of my teachers want to answer that? I don't mind answering, but I want to share the wealth here.
I gotcha. No, it's been implemented starting this year. So all classrooms have been following the structured literacy approach starting this current school year. So since the beginning of the year.
And I think it's important to share with you all, with parents, that this is a transition for our entire district. And so at Kensington, we've really jumped in. And so a lot of this has been a transition throughout this year, but you will also see this throughout the district and our state is all transitioning from, most of us have been doing balanced literacy into this structured literacy approach. So it's by no means absolutely perfect at this point, but we are so proud of the efforts that have been made, and we've seen huge growth gains just by this shift as well.
I do. It's Lisa again. I'll be transparent. I'm the grandparent. They're at the baseball fields and working tonight, so I'm proxy here. And I'm also a retired educator, so I come from the balanced literacy background. And I'm wondering, looking at a third grade granddaughter who is struggling more, and we were wondering how much of it was, the craziness of the last couple of years. And now I'm beginning to change my thinking that we're now looking at specific skills that perhaps she's struggling with. And I'm thinking my daughter may need more information about how to use the MClass, I guess is where I'm going with this.
That is excellent, an excellent insight. And absolutely, we have been using the MClass assessment K5 so that all of our teachers are speaking the same language, and so that you can also speak the same language no matter what grade your child is in. And so when you receive those assessments, what's so great about this is it's not just I'm giving you one score and that's an overall idea of how your child is achieving in reading. It really breaks it down into the different components that are like that rope is woven into what skilled reading it includes. So if you have questions concerning that, please feel free to reach out to your teacher. They are very well versed in that and can absolutely help you with how to dig deeper and then make some decisions about how to help your child specifically at home.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yes.
That's what I do. Thank you.
So I have a quick question. So have you all noticed any kind of, and excuse my voice, I am going hoarse, any kind of difference in how the kids are writing with this method? I've noticed that my child can write really well and can spell really well. However, the reading is suffering, and I'm kind of concerned, like, you have to be able to read to write. It doesn't go together for me. So I'm kind of wondering how this method is working with the writing portion of it.
It's an excellent question. So the way in which this instruction is structured is that students are applying the skills that they're learning at the word level, not just by reading, but also in writing. And so we call that switching from decoding to encoding. And so all of our students, especially at those foundational levels, as they're learning the sounds that certain letter combinations make, the teachers are having them apply that in their writing and their spelling. And so I'm hearing, and I would love for our teachers to speak up as well, I'm hearing from teachers when we were meeting together that kids who were kids are spelling better at this point in the year than they have in the past because of that intentional instruction. Now, this shift also, we're focusing more at a word level, so their spelling would be improved, but we also have to balance that with compositional writing. And so, like we said, that's a transition that we are also working through. As far as your concern about it transferring with the reading, I would definitely reach out to your child's teacher so you can get some more specific information, because we might need to dig a little bit deeper for that particular situation. Putting our words together to string them into sentences and then into paragraphs so that you then get a whole story or a whole report.
I can say from experience this year, I agree with what Ms. Campbell said is, when we teach a certain spelling pattern, the kids are recognizing it in their spelling. And so when we do sound boxes or tell the kids to spell a word that has that sound in it, they're doing really well being able to identify that. But then when it comes to writing instruction, where they have to write their opinion piece or their narrative or whatever type of writing we're working on, they still sometimes forget that, hey, I do know that spelling pattern, and they're still just going based off of, what do I hear, rather than remembering all of those patterns. And there are several new spelling patterns that we learn every year, so it's definitely just going to take more time and concentration, but I mean, it is coming together. And that's where a lot of times that syntax that we talked about a little bit comes into play too. So as the kids get older and we continue working on sentence structure, they'll start being able to be more comfortable with that and focus on their spelling as well. Right now, so many just want to write words. So they just want to get all the writing down on a page, and they're not focusing on the spelling, even though they know the spelling. They just want to get all their ideas on a page and go back and worry about spelling later. So, they need to feel more comfortable with the conventions of writing, and then the spelling will come.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on what Mrs. Moore was talking about, like in terms of my students when they're writing, if I realize they're working on a word that has a pattern that we've already focused on or seen within one of our decodable texts, all I have to do is like point it out to them. Is like, remember in this book, you remember this word? And they'll be like, and like they'll make that connection, be like, oh yeah, I need to put a CK after a short vowel sound, like something like that. And they're able to connect it and like be able to more like transfer it into their writing. But sometimes they do need that little extra connection or encouragement to help them to remember, because it is a new process and new skill and stuff that we are learning.
Mhm. Yes. So beginning, middle, and end of year, so 3 times a year, all teachers give a spelling inventory. And basically, this is a diagnostic assessment that takes that it's set up like an old school spelling test where the teacher reads a question or reads a word, then reads a sentence, and the students spell the word the best they can. But these words are not words that are studied prior. It's assessing whether they are able to apply the skills that they would have been taught prior to that moment, or where they are along a scope and sequence. So we'll start with the easiest type of spelling, which is CVC, or consonant vowel consonant, words like bed or cat. And then it's going to add on to more progressional skills. And so what's really cool is that when the spelling inventory is given, teachers are able to diagnose exactly what point in the progression of decoding and encoding, or reading and writing sound letter correspondence, a child needs to begin instruction. And so teachers do this again at the beginning, middle, and end of year to show growth, and also to gauge where they should begin their instruction with reading and spelling. And so to kind of answer that question, are there still spelling tests, or is that old school? Teachers they are still assessing how a child is applying their what they've learned in their phonics instruction for the day. But it is no longer, here's a whole list of 10 words that you get on Monday and you just memorize them to the end of the week. Because let's be real, those of us that did that, oftentimes we memorized the words, we drilled it all night, and we got our score on Friday. What research is showing us is that if we instead take this structured literacy approach and we use these strategic interventions, I guess to say, then what we're doing is we're actually mapping that in our brain. And so students are able to then use those patterns in lots of other words instead of just memorizing it for the test. Another question that I saw pop up that kind of connects to this is it typical for reading skills to come more easily, but spelling to take longer? The answer is yes. And that is because writing takes a lot more, a lot of different pieces of your brain to actually do that task than reading does. And so it is very typical that will come after reading is more mastered.
Yes, that is my question. Thank you.
I think actually Miss Moore, is answering it in the chat as well, but I can speak to that very quickly too. When you get those MClass reports, the easiest way is the report has color coded that for you. And so green means they are on target for where typical students at their grade level perform at that time of the year. And so the colors that you may see are green, yellow, red, or maybe blue. Green being at grade level, blue being above typical grade level, yellow meaning slightly below, and red meaning that they're 2 grade levels below. And of course, if you're interested in what do those levels mean, what do those colors represent as far as numbers, your teacher can absolutely share that information with you. It's just a very large chart with a lot of numbers in it. Yes, and it actually breaks it down by color within each skill as well, and gives you a little nice little range with a little person that shows where they are. So
yeah, and I was going to say, as teachers, we generally don't look at the composite score because that doesn't give you a good picture of how the child's performing. We really rely on the individual scores for each reading skill. So, you'll see that composite score on there, but really you want to focus on how it's broken down by each skill. I think the concern with that is, though, the studying the words then for the next time, which is why we didn't want to.
Because the words are the same. Yeah.
So, I know during at least first quarter conferences, parents should have seen the beginning of the year spelling inventories. And if parents are wanting to know how they did at the middle of the year or end of the year, they're more than welcome to reach out to the teachers. But I think the biggest concern for sending those home was those were going to become words that they're practicing at home rather than understanding the spelling pattern.
No, I understand that. I just thought the results, are they below, on grade level, just where are they with it?
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
I know when I taught fourth grade, we obviously rely heavily on computers for many different purposes, but we still always had the kids write out their rough drafts. And so it wasn't like they just started out on the computer. So they always had to still use those writing skills to physically write their essays or whatever they were writing that day. And then they can take that and bring it into the computer world. What we still do, even in second grade, I had my second graders typing and I was like, hey, that little red line means you spelled something wrong. So it's actually been a helpful tool for the students to even recognize that, hey, that's not spelled right. So let me double check that word. I understand autocorrect, especially if they're really close to spelling it, will fix it for them, but it still underlines it for them to see that that word was changed. So it's still a way for the kids to recognize, hey, I didn't spell that right the first time. Let me look at how it's spelled now. And it's been beneficial for those grade levels that are using it in that way.
Yeah. So I have a question about the nonsense fluency words that you brought up. How effective is that? Like, I'm not quite. I mean, I've heard about it and I see where it's going, but I don't see how effective it is because I can see where my son is not doing well in that part, but when he reads a book, he's fluent and he's accurate. where's the nonsense part coming in? Like, I don't understand how that works.
Sure. I can speak to that. This is an area that I get excited about because I know this is a question that a lot of people have. And so the purpose of nonsense words and practicing or doing an assessment or seeing how kids do with reading a nonsense word is their true application of being able to do that sound letter correspondence. Are they truly able to decode by the sounds of the words and not just relying on, well, that might be a word that they've seen a million bajillion times, right? A kid can probably read the word cat because they've seen it over and over again, but that may not mean that they're able to attend to every single sound in that word. They may not truly understand that that vowel in the middle of the two consonants is going to make an a instead of an a sound because of the spelling pattern. And so when we give a child a nonsense word, they cannot rely on that type of background knowledge. So we can truly, so it's like we're getting to the meat of, do they truly, are they able to truly decode? When we see a situation where a child might be fluent in reading a certain text with real words and not able to apply it in nonsense words, what that tells us is oftentimes the reader might be relying on a compensating skill where they've kind of done that memorization piece of the word. And at the more foundational levels, that's okay. I mean, it doesn't tend to show that it's a struggle for that child until they get into more complex texts. So when we get into 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, oftentimes what we see is a kid who reaches the end of 3rd grade or, is getting into the harder text, they might have looked like they were succeeding really well in 1st or 2nd grade because they were just memorizing those one syllable, easier patterned words. But when they're given multi-syllabic words that have 3 and 4 syllables in them, then they're having a hard time chunking those and breaking those apart in order to attend to each of the sounds there. And if you think about a 3 or 4 syllable word, like the word fantastic, fan is the first part of that. That's a real word. But task could be considered a nonsense word. But if I know the spelling pattern in that chunk, then I can sound that out. Same with tick. And so that helps kids to attend to a much larger word. So you may not see the benefits of it right now if it's a younger reader, but as they get into more complex text, it is definitely going to benefit them. Excellent question. Thank you for asking that. Go for it, Flores.
Okay, well, I'd like to get into a whole nother ballgame here. So with sight words, we refer to them more of like high frequency words versus what I call heart words. And so a high frequency word is going to be a word that you can decode, that kids are going to see a lot within text, like the word can or the word yes, like those are very decodable words. But then you have words like said, which we consider a heart word because the AI doesn't match the pattern and the sound correspondence that you would see when you would match a sound to those letters. And so the kids have to remember that that is a heart part. And we talk about why it's a heart part. And we really break apart the words and talk about their meaning. Like for another example, like have. It has the silent E at the end. And typically when you have the silent E, the E is supposed to make the vowel say its name, but it's not have, it's have. But I've taught the kids to know that within our English language, you cannot have a word that ends with a V. It doesn't happen. So the E kind of takes that place to create the word. And so like just getting them to understand why versus just giving them a word and say, hey, this is a sight word, I need you to memorize it, if that makes sense. So we still talk about these words, but we go a little bit more in depth with them as to why they're spelled the way they're spelled, if that makes sense.
And if I could piggyback off of what she said, as a child starts to learn these patterns, we obviously want them to become automatic. We don't want them to have to decode through the word forever. We want them to become automatic, and that comes from multiple repetitions of seeing that word, manipulating the sounds, and all of the things that we were describing earlier. So when we talk about that, that's automaticity is what we're looking for versus just memorize this word. We want them to have multiple experiences with the words and the sound patterns, and what those patterns and rules are, so that then it just becomes automatic because they learn those rules along with it and can apply. So when we're talking automaticity, that's kind of a shift in mindset of going from it's a sight word to, well, now that word has become automatic. So now it truly is a sight word for me because I can see it by sight and I can automatically decode it.